Hello my friends and welcome to me making Pommes Anna. Here I'm setting the oven to 350. Here I'm starting to cut onions. You'll have to forgive the glove you'll see in a moment here. Apparently I can't talk and chew gum at the same time, so while I was describing what I was doing with the onions, I cut myself and therefore had to wear a band-aid with a glove over the top. This is the way I like to cut onions, leaving the roots on if I'm dicing them, as you'll see here in a moment. Diced. Also band-aid glove. Now I'm going to add bacon into this recipe. I think bacon and potatoes really goes well, and just a smidge of bacon really helps this recipe. Just a fine chop, just about that much. Then put the bacon away and grab our scooper and scoop our bacon up. And we're going to chuck that bacon in a frying pan on low-medium heat. Frying pan was heating up on high-medium heat, and you'll see me knock that down all the way down. So please forgive the shaking here. I do a little bit of sauteing. That motion is called sauteing, and there will be some amount of shaking involved there. Multiple times, as you see. Now we're going to come over to the sink and wash our potatoes, which is a necessary step because I am going to leave the potato skins on. Then we're going to grab our trusty mandolin, set the settings to 3 millimeters, which I decided afterwards was too thick for this recipe, but so I'd go thinner than that. But we're going to mandolin all our potatoes into thin slices, like so. Also, the cut-proof glove here is mandatory. Luckily, one came with my mandolin. One could also do this step with a food processor. Here we see more shaking as I saute the bacons. Now we're going to add some cottage cheese. Ricotta is better, but we're pretending we're camping because of the shelter in place. For sure, no measuring required here, just go nuts. Again, no measuring with any of these spices. We're doing garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, and a little bit of my homemade dried serrano powder. Just a little bit because my dad's going to be eating this and his taste buds are skewed more towards the Scandinavian palate. Again, none of this needs to be measured. It's all to taste, whatever you feel like. Pretty much dealer's choice on the spice types as well. Just the barest pinch of serrano powder here. Now we're back to more bacon shaking. We are still on low, and I'm going to add a big old couple of spoonfuls of garlic to that. And Dad Cameo making short ribs. I'm going to take my scooper again that my sister got me for Christmas and scoop all of my onions into that same pan, making sure to get all the little bits. Then we're going to get back to shaking here to mix this all up. And I'm going to grab some salt because salt will help draw moisture out of the onions, which will then allow them to brown up better. And while I've got it, I'm going to salt my taters as well. Dad Cameo followed by more shaking. Just never stop shaking. Now I'm going to grab some Parmigiano and add that into the taters, followed by some Asiago. Now, Parmesan has a sharper flavor than Asiago, so the blend is totally to taste, but I went with more Parmesan than Asiago. Again, this is not something that needs to be measured. I don't think anything in this recipe is measured. It's not like baking, where it's really important to get the right measurements. And then, of course, you guessed it, back to more shaking, because why not? It's fun. You should try it. Now we're going to get our pan ready, which is a springform pan rather than a cast iron pan, and you'll see why this was a stupid decision. More shaking. And just when you thought we were done, even more shaking. I honestly think I was just having fun at this point. You get to see Dad laying pork ribs into the pan, though, so that's positive bonus footage. And here we stop shaking for a moment to do a little swirl and then back to shaking. Now we're going to butter our springform pan and really butter it. Like put more butter in than you think you need and then put a little bit more butter in. Then we're going to do something kind of cool where we add cheese in a layer to the pan and that will help us with a nice brown crust. Then of course, as is tradition, we're going to go back to shaking. And you can see it's starting to brown up a little bit here. And one more shake, just for good measure. Did I say one more? I meant 2 more. And this is looking brown enough, so here's where I decided to add it to the potato mixture that I've got going. Now we're going to use that same pan, so I clear a little landing pad for it. And I add the rest of my butter from buttering my springform pan. Then, because I was feeling a little bit squirrely, I also add in a spoonful of pork fat, because why not? Then I grab a sprig of thyme from the garden and put that all together, bring it over to the stove, and put that on low heat. Then I commence to mixing this gamish that we've got going, trying to get everything at least mostly combined at this stage. Then I gotta check on my thyme mix, and we want the thyme to release all of its thymy goodness into the butter and pork fat. I'm only like 90% sure that the flavonoids in thyme are oleophatic, and this actually works, but the end result tasted pretty good, so mostly I just moved this around over the heat until I felt like the thyme flavor had been absorbed by the butter, and then I pulled the thyme out. I'll admit, the main reason I did it this way because of how much of a pain it is to pick thyme leaves off of thyme stems. So I think this idea worked, but feel free to fact check me on whether or not thyme flavonoids are oleophatic. Regardless, it's way easier this way, but feel free to just add dried thyme out of the jar, or worst case, pick thyme leaves off the stem. Anyway, here I am pulling the thyme out onto a paper towel, trying to shake off as much of the butter as I can, and then I will add the entire butter pork fat mixture into the potatoes and mix that all up, making sure, of course, to get every last drop of buttery goodness in there. Then, because this is the final mix, I'm going to mix it up really well, and then I did judgment call, add a tiny pinch of cornstarch just to make sure my final product wasn't too liquidy. Now comes the moment of truth where we start transferring. I like to do a layer of nicely arranged slices just because we're going to turn this upside down and that's going to be our top, so we want it to look good. Then I'm just going to start grabbing handfuls and chucking them in there, trying to make them mostly lay flat. The important thing here is that there are no empty spaces in our finished product. Making sure to get every last bit of that stuff in there. And then what I'm going to do is push it down as flat as possible. Really giving it the beans here just to make sure there's no air pockets. I'm going to add a little bit more cheese here, even though this is going to be the bottom. And here's where I decide that I want a little bit of freshly ground black pepper in there. So, mortar and pestle, grind, 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 ignore the bleeding thumb, and sprinkle, sprinkle. Then we give it what one of my favorite YouTube chefs calls the old tappy tap and chuck it in our oven. This is about a half hour later, just checking it, and it's not quite done, but I'm going to give it a turn because my oven is a little bit unevenly heated. So, turny turn, and then we'll come back later. I also would for sure recommend a drip pan for this. It's now later, and this was looking brown enough where I wanted to pull it out and leave it to rest on top of the oven. Then I had to put the camera down so I could turn it upside down and take it out of the springform. Unfortunately, long story short, because I didn't use my normal preheated cast iron, the outside was not brown and crispy. So all I had to do was chuck it under the broiler for a little bit and let it brown up on the outside. The broiler provides a whole ton of heat, but is definitely something that needs to be watched closely while it's going. And here's a possibly unnecessary shot of some bubbly potatoes. Then I decided it was brown enough, so I slid it onto this pizza peel. Bottom line is, it was really tasty, but next time I'll either preheat the springform or do it in my normal cast iron. Hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.